What's up, everybody? Welcome to Wednesday. We appreciate you being here with us. It's a special David Ortiz and only David Ortiz is going into the Baseball Hall of Fame because the entire voting system is broken edition of The Sweat. Adam Kaufman, we got a whole lot of people joining over the course of the next hour to break things down, whether it's football, obviously conference championship weekend. We got a big, robust slate in the NBA, about half those games going on the ice in the NHL, and of course, more football to take us home. Let's jump right in there to the gridiron and begin with our panel of DraftKings contributors. We have got Pierce Dietrich, Matt Meiselman, and Harrison Morgan superfan Steve Buchanan. Boys, we will be checking out some of the conference championship specials available on the DraftKings Sportsbook on Sunday. First, though, Sean Payton, he is out in New Orleans as we approach 10 head coaching vacancies in the NFL. It's a wild offseason, obviously. Bukes, we'll start with you. What'd you think of Payton's decision to step down?
Well, I mean, convenient timing. You know, you're like $71 million deep in salary cap issues, and you're like, I'm going to step back. Maybe he realized Taysom Hill's not a good quarterback, too. So all of this just comes to fruition, and he's like, you know what, maybe it's a good time to step back. I mean, look, the Saints team is in for a major overhaul with all the issues that they're having with cap space. They have questions under center. And look, you know, Sean Payton's been an extremely good coach. There's nothing to take away from that. You know, maybe he's not someone, you know, quote unquote, retiring, stepping away. But this whole team is in need of an overhaul, and this seems to be the first domino to fall.
Pierce, any surprise?
Yeah, no, it's time to get out. I think Michael Thomas wants to get out too. I wouldn't be surprised to see Alvin Kamara get out as well. It's not quite a dumpster fire, but there are a lot of issues on this team, which is in contrast to when he took over. Jim Haslett built a really strong team. Hurricane Katrina happened, and then he inherited a really good team, made it better. But this team is in trouble moving forward.
Matt, what do they do next?
Yeah, I'm not really sure, but to Steve's point about Sean Payton wanting to get away from this salary cap problem, I mean, I did the same thing in my Dynasty Fantasy Baseball League. You know, my team, I went all in to try to make the finals, and then I had to rebuild. It was like, I don't feel like that. So, you know, I'll just leave the league, right? You can do that. Pierce mentioned Michael Thomas. I think this is the thing that's the most depressing about the Saints is the injuries. They could have had a team where we had Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas, who I think when he's healthy is in contention for best receiver in football, and Jameis Winston. That just would have been so much fun, and we never really got to see it. So I'm more just sad than anything that didn't really happen for at least, like, you know, a lot of games. We had a game or two of it, but not much of it.
All right, let's get into the weekend then. Of course, there are still 4 teams that are set to play, and they all have head coaches, so we'll celebrate them. The Bengals, the Chiefs in the AFC, couple of stud quarterbacks. Of course, Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow. You can get plus 150 odds on the pair to combine for at least 600 passing yards. Pierce, is it going to happen?
Yeah, it's going to happen. Burrow get the 600 on his own. They're giving money away this week. Last week, we had a bet where we had to consider Josh Allen and Mahomes getting 10 touchdowns last week for plus 2,000, which we all agreed should have been closer to plus 5,000. That was one of the most action-packed games of the year. Went into overtime, and they still only managed 7 touchdowns. And you compare that to this week, this should be like 700 yards for plus 150.
You in line with that, Matt? Is the number too low?
I don't know. Like, I don't think these guys do it, but you are getting plus 150. So I'm a little torn here, but I just feel like this game can go more ways than people realize, right? Like, it seems like everyone's assuming it's a foregone conclusion that the game is close for one, and also that both teams decide to pass a lot. The Bengals spent most of the season as a run-first team, and there were a couple of fluky games in there where they were either losing and needed to pass, or they were playing the Ravens with no secondary, and that particular week they decided to just game plan where they were going to pass every play. But I don't know that I think Burrow's good. Obviously, the receivers on that team are really, really good. But I think there's a pretty likely scenario where the game is just a little more conservative than people are expecting, and we don't see a ton of passing. So I don't think it gets there. I think we probably end up between 550 and 600.
Steve, I feel like Matt's just being a contrarian on this one.
Yeah, maybe he is, and that's good for content. He knows how to do it right. So congrats to Matt on that, and shout out to him for leaving his league. You know, I've no qualms about that at all. Here's the thing that I have about Joe Burrow, specifically in this game. Who was the best quarterback in the league, yards per pass attempt against man coverage? Joe Burrow, averaging 9.2 yards per pass attempt in that scenario. Who runs a ton of man coverage? The Kansas City Chiefs, who annihilated that secondary for 446 yards back in week 17 against man coverage. Joe Burrow. So if we get anything even close to that, then on the other side of the ball, you got Patrick Mahomes. Here's a nice bankroll builder. Take the over. Take that bet.
All right, let's stay in the same game. Go to the pass catchers. Of course, Matt, we'll go right back to you here. Travis Kelce or, of course, Jamar Chase. Will either of them reach 125 receiving yards? This bet gives you two options plus 200 odds if one of them can get there.
Yeah, I'm going to have to be a bit contrarian again, but I'll at least name a player that I like because I don't just think no one's going to score points across this entire conference championship weekend. But I just don't think the Bengals and Chiefs are going to be as high scoring as people expect. If I'm down on the quarterbacks a little bit, I can't really be that high on the pass catchers either. So Tyreek Hill is really the main reason that I don't love this. I think that he continues to be the main part of the offense ahead of Kelce. And 125 yards is just a lot for Jamar Chase. And I think he's a little bit reliant on breaking tackles, which he does do from time to time. But I think T. Higgins might even be the more reliable receiver on the team. So the one guy I like this week to hit his over for yards is George Kittle. He's in the other game. I don't really love either of these guys to get to 125.
Bukes, 125 too lofty for those two?
It's kind of odd because it's like, why are you throwing Travis Kelce in the mix? He's done this once this season. Like, yes, he's had a couple of games where he's gone over 100 yards, so it's not like it's out of his realm to do so, but this is not something that he, consistently hits. Like, he does get the yardage, like I mentioned, but over 125 is a bit odd. So now it really just brings you down to Jamar Chase. And we've all seen that Jamar Chase is obviously somebody who can do this on a basis that, is more consistent, at least, than Travis Kelce. But this is still really a lofty number. Like, getting over 100 is impressive enough. Getting over that 125, it is something too. So I'm not crazy about this one. Can Chase do it? Of course. But like adding Kelce in the mix, I don't really think you're giving giving too much more with that sense. So I'm not liking this bet at all.
Pierce, throwing it back to the last question. If Joe Burrow's going for 600-700 yards by himself, you must be a believer in Jamar Chase.
Yeah, I'm bullish on Cincinnati. I'm bullish on Kansas City. I think both of them can easily clear this number. And it's half of what Chase got in the last time he faced this man-to-man defense, as Steve mentions. 125 is a big number, but it's not necessarily a big number for Chase. We've seen him explode. If you look at Kelce, 24th in DVOA is what Cincinnati is versus tight ends. They've allowed the fifth most receptions, sixth most receiving yards to tight ends. He was quiet in the first matchup, but that was his first game back from COVID and other injuries. I would imagine that he's going to be healthy, ready to go. And if you want to play the narrative street, he's from Ohio and he played at Cincinnati. I don't know if that's going to give you any edge, but when you're chasing a huge number like this, you'll take any kind of narrative you can take.
Guys, the NFC title game is going to feature the Niners and the Rams. I don't entirely know what to make of this game, but what I can tell you is one special focuses on Cooper Kupp, who of course has had an historic season. The odds plus 400. The Kupp goes for 100 receiving yards and LA scores 33 points. What do you think of that number, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, the Rams have gone over 33 points 5 times this season. So it's not something that they're not accustomed to doing. So I've lost more money than any other team on the 49ers this year. So I'm the worst person to ask about how I think a 49ers game is going to go. With that said, do we think that they're going to put up 33 points against this team? I mean, I don't want to say they've struggled against San Francisco this season, but, they lost that first one 31-10, and then they lost early in the 27-24. So it's not like they've exactly crushed this team. The Cooper Kupp card is fine. Of course, like he's going to go over 100 receiving yards when they actually need to pass, which you saw against Tampa Bay, 9 catches for 183 yards. So when they're passing the ball, unlike when they were in Arizona, he's going to go over that mark. So I do sort of like this one, but the struggles that they've had against San Francisco can't be forgotten about either.
Pierce, you're going to have to be as bullish on the Rams as you are on the Bengals for this to come to fruition. Are you?
I am not. It's not that far off. LA has averaged 28 points per game, so it's not that far to get to 33. But San Francisco has a pretty good defense. And San Francisco's offense could struggle giving short fields to LA, which could help with the point totals as well. Kupp really isn't much of a question in this game. It's just can LA be consistent for 4 quarters? We've seen them play 2 really good first halves where they scored over 20 points in both of their playoff games. They've eased off or just have been inconsistent in the second half of those games. And then, like Steve mentioned, San Francisco's played LA well in the past. Last time San Francisco played LA, they had a 40% pressure rate. If there's a 40% pressure rate on Matt Stafford, they're not getting to 33.
Matt, I know you like George Kittle, obviously, on the other side of this game. How are you feeling about Kupp and Rams offense exploding?
I'm just trying to run these numbers through my brain because we need at least a 20% chance to make plus 400, a good bet. And there's probably 60% chance that Cooper Kupp gets to 100 yards. The Rams team total is 24, 25 points, so we need them 8 or 9 above expectation. I mean, it's pretty unlikely. And I guess if Kupp does have a big game, then it's much more likely the Rams do really well. The problem is that 100 yards for Cooper Kupp is not necessarily a big game. He does that all the time. So ultimately, I think this probably is one that I'm going to stay away from too. I promise we're going to get to another one later in this segment that I actually do like, but I still feel like it's not quite enough odds for this.
Okay, maybe that'll be this one. We've got a running prop, plus 170 for Elijah Mitchell and Cam Akers to combine for 150 yards on the ground. Doesn't feel like a giant number here, Pierce. What do you think?
It does feel like a giant number when you look at the defenses they're facing. I like both the running backs in DFS if you're trying to be slightly contrarian and getting away from that AFC game. But betting-wise, I'm just not crazy about it. I think you can count on Eli Mitchell for 75 rushing yards. His prop is set at 71.5. If you don't think he can get there, then you should probably just go ahead and bet the Rams. I don't think he's who you really need to worry about. It's Cam Akers, who his rushing prop's at 60 yards. San Francisco is second when it comes to adjusted rushing yards to running backs at 3.5. So even if Akers gets 20 carries, it's going to be tough for him to get there against a pretty good rush defense. And I know it's amazing that he is back, but he hasn't necessarily looked amazing on the field in his first 2 playoff games. 3.2 yards per carry, 2 yards per carry. I think he's the weak link that doesn't get us there.
So, Matt, Pierce basically just did the math for us. 130 on the DraftKings Sportsbook. That's the combination projected for those two. Can we get to 150?
Yeah, so it's not going to be this question for me either. I think the next one is the one where I'm going to be more bullish on it. The problem with the rushing prop, where you need one guy from each team also, is that if one running back does well, it's less likely that the other running back does well. That's not the case for a quarterback prop, where one quarterback throwing for a lot of yards means more possessions for the other quarterback. It's actually a good thing. But the better that the Rams run the ball, the less opportunities the 49ers are going to have to run the ball and vice versa. So I'm not really that excited about this one. I am a little worried about Cam Akers and the fumbling problems. If there's a running back I do like this week, it's Joe Mixon, not just because he's contrarian. I think he's got a rushing prop in the 50s. And I do think the Bengals may just decide to run the ball more than people expect. So if I have to like a running back this week, it's Joe Mixon, not these guys.
Bukes, you in favor of these guys?
Yeah, not really much to add here. Like the worry here was with Cam Akers. Like he ran the ball 24 times last week against Tampa, brought 48 yards back on those 24 carries. That's not very good. And granted, Tampa's been a much better run defense than almost every team in the league. But, even against the Cardinals, 17 carries for 55 yards, not exactly oozing, a ton of yardage in those scenarios. So I don't like this one here. I think Elijah Mitchell should have a good game. We've seen him run over the Rams in 2 games now, so I feel confident about him. But Cam Akers is the weak link in this one, so I'm not a fan of this one.
Last one, 4-game special. This is exciting for Conference Championship Sunday. The odds are plus 500 for every starting quarterback to throw for at least 250 yards on Sunday. Matt, is this your question?
Yeah, I think we can get there on this one. Plus 500, so it's going to take a little bit of luck for this to happen, but at plus 500, I think there's enough probability for all quarterbacks to get to 250, that one's worth it. And really what it comes down to, for me at least, is I think Jimmy Garoppolo is at least better than these guys think he is. I don't know if he's good, but I do think that the 49ers should have some success passing. I think their passing game is a little bit undervalued, even though it's not great. I think part of what's happening is they just look so bad last week against the Packers, and this environment just sets up better, if for no other reason than the weather is going to be a lot easier to play through. Los Angeles is a lot less problematic than Green Bay in terms of the cold and the wind and everything. So I think Garoppolo should do fine, and for that reason, I mean, the other 3 quarterbacks, we probably all expect them to go over 250 yards. So I think they have at least a decent chance to all get there.
I was just going to say, if anyone feels like they're going to be the ugly duckling in this situation, is the most handsome man, Steve, which is, of course, Jimmy Garoppolo. How are you reading this thing?
I mean, what a dumb follow-up statement that was. No one cares about how handsome he is or anything like that.
I care.
About this
He's
question.
a very handsome man, Bukes.
Yeah, I know. He's a former
jealous.
Patriot, so we got to gush over him. Look, the problem is
he's
I would like this bet
anymore. He's still
more.
handsome.
Will you shut up? I would like this bet more if it also counted the yards that the opposing defense would gain when they pick six Jimmy Garoppolo 7 times in this game. Then Jimmy could hit over 250. But since that doesn't count, I don't like this one because all 3 of the other quarterbacks will hit this mark, and Jimmy Garoppolo is going to walk away with 172 yards. Mark the tape, and then let me know when that actually comes to fruition, and then we can say how smart I am, and everybody can be embarrassed about how much you were gushing over former Patriot Jimmy Garoppolo.
I didn't say anything about it being a Patriot. Pierce, you're more pleasant. What do you think?
It's going to be hard to – yeah, I try to be. This is basically a Jimmy G bet, and I don't want anything to do with it. It's props at 225, so you need him to go 25 over that. He's gone over 250 8 of 17 times this season. A lot of those games he was healthy. I just don't see him getting there. The last 2 games, he's been way under this. He's been closer to the number that Steve mentioned, 172. Now, some of that's due to game scripts. The other part is due to health. The game script probably will be better, but his health, I don't think it's going to be any better. You look at the last 2 games, his intended air yards, 6.2, 5.7. Even if we do get a positive game script where he's passing a lot, he's just checking the ball down. He's not throwing deep passes. You're basically going to need a big-time Deebo Samuel play to bail you out. If you don't get that 70-yard Deebo Samuel play, you're not cashing.
All right, we're going to do some more football later. A different trio of guys going to come in and join us, but Bukes, I assure you, we'll miss you. Basketball on the way when we return on The Sweat. All right, let's hit the hardwood with DraftKings contributors Gary and Thorne, Nick Fryer, plus RotoWire's Nick Whalen. Guys, it's great to see you. Gary, and I'm going to start with you because, well, you're the only one not named Nick. So, NBA building blocks, a look at tonight's 10-game slate, obviously talking DFS. Who is your building block at center?
Yeah, I think the only way I wasn't going to play this guy at center tonight was if he suddenly appeared with point guard eligibility, and he has not. So going back to Pascal Siakam at $8,900, look, just nothing's changed, and I don't think I expect anything to change in this particular game. He's $8,900, which is the exact price point he was on yesterday's slate. We don't know the status of Scotty Barnes and Fred VanVleet as of yet, but I would have to think if they weren't healthy enough to play in yesterday's game, it's probably more unlikely than not that they're healthy enough to play in tonight's game. So if both of those guys are out once again, this is just too low a price point for someone who is the leading scorer, number one offensive option, and de facto point guard for his team. I mean, Siakam played 39.4 minutes last night against the Hornets, scored 24 points, grabbed 9 rebounds, had 12 assists, 17 potential assists. He's just doing everything for this team right now, and he should be well above the 9K mark considering what his role is. And Chicago, not that great a defensive team suddenly when you take away their 2 best perimeter defenders. I mean, the major concerns we had about a Nikola Vucevic, Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan threesome, I mean, those defensive concerns are kind of important when Lonzo Ball and Alex Caruso are no longer there filling in the gaps. So I just think it's a pretty good matchup for Pascal Siakam as well.
Well, and Pascal Siakam projected for right around 40 points tonight. Thing is, I mean, you could save $1,200 and go to another guy who's projected for right around 40, and Yusuf Nurkic, Fryer. So you want to, I don't know, pay down a little bit at center? Do you want to go for one of the studs? What's the approach?
I think we're already paying down with Pascal Siakam because, I mean, look at what Jokic has been doing. Of course, he's been crazy right now and going up against the Nets. I still like him in this spot tonight. Who doesn't like Jokic? But Pascal Siakam is my favorite. I'm with Gary on this one. Just to kind of add on to what he was talking about, because a lot of stuff he covered that I wanted to talk about. When in terms of his output, he's got a minimum of 45 DK fantasy points in 9 of the 11 games this month, and then that's 5 times salary for what he's priced at tonight. He's gone over 60 DK fantasy points in 5 of those games. And looking at the Bulls, one of the worst teams against opposing centers in terms of fantasy production this season. They're not moving at the fastest rate, but they're still ranked 12th in pace, so it's a pace up spot for the Raptors that are 26th in that category. And then the Bulls are, Gary was talking about their defensive rating and everything. They're middle of the pack. Even when you look at the entire season, they're middle of the pack defensive rating. So not exactly a spot where I'm going to be worried about Siakam. If anything, I feel really great about him today.
Are we getting to the point here, Waylon, where no matter what Joker is priced at and it's 12-4 tonight, you just have to play the guy?
I think we are. I mean, you obviously don't have to play him, but there's a pretty good chance you're going to get burned when you look at his game log, and it's like 65, 63, 74, 81 DraftKings points.
93.
And so in some of these games this season, I mean, it's insane. I checked the score last night. He was had a massive double-double at halftime against Detroit and had like 19 rebounds, I think, going into the fourth quarter. I mean, it's getting crazy, some of the numbers that we're seeing from Jokic. And I think Gary called it perfectly on the show yesterday when he said, this team, when he's off the floor and even sometimes when he's on the floor, they're just not good enough to pull away from a team like Detroit. So from a fantasy perspective, it's perfect because he could put up like 30, 20, and 7, and all of a sudden it's a 6-point game with 8 minutes left, and he's going to play the rest of the way. So, it's kind of set up perfectly for DFS players. So, of course, I have no problem using Nikola Jokic tonight. I do like Bam Adebayo as well at 7,700. I think he's looked pretty good in his 4 games back since returning from that thumb injury. You mentioned Nurkic at 7,700. I was choosing between Nurkic and Cat in some of those late contests last night, and Nurkic turned out to be the right choice. He outplayed Karl-Anthony Towns in that game, even though Minnesota ended up getting the win. And if you want to price down a little bit at center, it could be a Hassan Whiteside night with no Rudy Gobert. Again, for Utah, Whiteside's at 6,600. And then no DeAndre Ayton and no JaVale McGee for Phoenix, which... I can't believe I'm saying this, but it opens up the possibility of a Bismack Biyombo play at 5,500.
You, Nick W., let's stay with you here, and we go to the forwards. And there's some interesting, again, sort of like Nurkic or obviously Siakam to an extent, there are some pay-down options at forward. You could look at DeMar DeRozan. You could go to Kristaps Porzingis. But is this a situation where you want to pay up, assuming Giannis is out there and available tonight? Do you want the Greek Freak or somebody else?
Yeah, I mean, Giannis is in that Jokic territory at this point, and I wouldn't worry too much about the injury designation. I think he's probable with that knee that has kind of been an issue on and off for the last few years. But, you guys mentioned Siakam. He's eligible at forward, of course, as well as center. 8,900, a really good deal for a guy who's going to play close to 40 minutes every single night. Obviously, last night, was incredible as far as what he was doing as a playmaker, so I'm fully on board there. Both Zach LaVine at 8,300 and DeRozan at 8,200 are appealing. I think I would lean DeRozan. He rested in their last game, so he should be coming back fresh after carrying a crazy heavy workload and a major burden offensively over their last few games without LaVine. So I think he's in a good spot tonight. And, I still never really want to trust RJ Barrett. 7,800 is kind of right on the cusp of where you start to really think twice about it, but he's in the middle of the best stretch of his career. In season-long fantasy, with what we deal with at RotoWire, his free throw percentage has been a major hindrance. He's at like 65%, but, for DK purposes, that's not that big of a deal. And part of me kind of wants to ride with the hot hand, so I think I'll have RJ Barrett in a couple lineups today.
Raptors fan Gary and Thorne, I'll let you say OJ Anunoby. I'll let you say Scotty Barnes. You can't say Pascal Siakam again, even though he's forward eligible.
Well, one of those people doesn't exist, and one of those people might be hurt, so I won't say either of those two guys. I think there's a couple interesting options in like that mid-tier area Nick was kind of talking about. I think like Wendell Carter Jr. up against the Clippers is in an interesting spot. I think I like him obviously more if Mo Bamba's not playing, but the Clippers needed a Herculean 35-point comeback in the second half against the Wizards. to pull out that game. They're on the second night of a back-to-back. They could have some tired legs. So I think Carter's in a nice spot. But, you did mention Kristaps Porzingis, and I think he's in a very nice spot as well. You cross your fingers and hope he doesn't kick a ball into the stands tonight, and that kind of cuts his minutes short. But this is someone who you go back across his last 13 games, which has really been this magical run that the Mavericks have been on. He's averaging well over 1.3 DraftKings points per minute, and that's key. I mean, efficiency is great for a lot of DFS assets. It is particularly important for someone like Porzingis, who is not going to get to that Pascal Siakam territory of 40 minutes. I mean, this is someone who you're just hoping he plays more than 30 minutes on any given night, because if he does that, more often than not, he's going to hit value. It's a really good matchup as well. I just think that Porzingis is in a nice spot. I might lean Wendell Carter just for the savings, but I think both are really, really, really viable.
Gary, he might exist and just not play basketball. We don't know.
It's possible. Were you thinking of OJ Mayo?
I look, OJ, it's close. Fryer, what do you got?
I'm actually going to go with OJ Mayo, tonight. That was a deep pull. But anyways, Wendell Carter Jr. was on my radar, so I'm right with Gary on that one. But I kind of look at him more as an accent piece if we're trying to think about a forward to actually build around tonight. Miles Bridges is my guy. I know he's been off the last couple games in terms of fantasy production, but he's been still right around 20 actual points. He's going up against the Pacers tonight at 8.2K, and the Pacers are a bottom 10 team in terms of defensive efficiency. And right now, they're without their two best bigs, and Miles Turner and Domantas Sabonis. That's going to help Bridges' rebounding numbers, which is where we kind of need that extra boost because, obviously, offensively, he's still providing production there.
Let's go guard, and we'll stay with you, Fryer. Some of your top options, they all played last night. James Harden absolutely exploded, obviously. DeJounte Murray, because that game was lopsided, was a little bit of a disappointment. Luka Doncic, he busted by, for all intents and purposes. So where are you going? Are you going to pay up, or are you looking at value?
I do have a pay-up option. I do have a value option as well, and they're actually both coming in the same game. Trae Young and Tyrese Halliburton. Halliburton, of course, is dependent on De'Aaron Fox if he doesn't play again tonight. Despite what happened in Boston, I know he had a rough game, a rough showing there from a fantasy perspective, but still, I like him tonight if De'Aaron Fox doesn't play at 7.9K. But Trae Young is absolutely my top option tonight at 10.4K. The 5 highest price guards are all in good spots. I know, Adam, you're talking a little bit about the struggles of some of the guys the other night, but Trae Young, Harden, Morant, Doncic, and Murray. In that order is how I like those guys right now for the highest price options because the Kings, they struggle defensively against opposing point guards. This has the highest total as of right now on DK Sportsbook. When I last checked, the Nets-Nuggets total wasn't there, but I'm sure that's going to be pretty high. Both of these teams are not at all efficient on the defensive end, and this is a pace-up spot for the Hawks too. So Trae Young is my number one guy tonight.
Waylon, where are you looking at guard?
Yeah, I really like Trae Young at that price, 10,400. Great matchup against Sacramento. Obviously, the Kings coming off of that 50-plus point loss last night. I think it's a pretty bad back-to-back, or an unfortunate back-to-back, I guess. Tough spot to kind of regroup and come back from that one. So I think the Hawks are in a great spot. Trae Young's in a great spot. I think Chris Paul also in a pretty good spot against a Utah team that normally you don't target, but, with no Mitchell, no Gobert, not as fearsome of a rim protector there. For CP3, so I think he's a pretty good deal at 9,000. I assume Garen's going to mention DeJounte Murray. I don't love him as much as I normally do. Tough back-to-back for San Antonio, one of several teams on a back-to-back. So I think I'm going to resist the urge and probably not have a lot of DeJounte Murray lineups tonight. And then if you're choosing at the top of the board, I think I would pick Luka to bounce back against Portland tonight at 11,100 over James Harden, who's a little more expensive at 11,500. I mean, monster night for Harden last night against the Lakers. He looked awesome. But again, difficult back-to-back for the Brooklyn Nets. And, he kind of has to be the one-man show. And obviously he's been good at that throughout his career. But if you read that Bleacher Report piece yesterday, it doesn't really sound like that's what he wants to do anymore. So I think last night probably a little bit of a frustration game for James Harden. I don't know if he can do it twice in a row.
Gary, you've got some good relative paydown options at guard, too, whether it's Cole Anthony or LaMelo Ball, somebody like that. Who stands out to you?
Yeah, I think if there's one guy, he's already been mentioned twice, so I won't spend too long on Trae Young, but, it's Sacramento. They are a team that just does not seem to be caring right now in many facets of the game, but one of those facets is defense. They have the worst defensive rating in the league by a pretty wide margin their last 10 games, so it's not surprising Atlanta has the highest implied team total on this slate. by a pretty significant margin. So Trae Young should have one of his better games. I know he's been struggling to reach value the past month or so, but I think this is one of those nights where he breaks out. The other guy I'm sort of honing in on above 8K, I think Karis LeVert. I mean, he's really just the last clear offensive option that Indiana has, and fantastic matchup against Charlotte. I mean, Charlotte under most circumstances doesn't play defense. Charlotte on a back-to-back, oh boy. I mean, Karis LeVert really could have his way with this defense in an up-tempo matchup. So I think 8,600 is a really nice price to pay for someone who I would be shocked if you look at the box score tonight and he doesn't have at least 20 field goal attempts.
All right, guys, one more for you. We'll go to the DraftKings Sportsbook. Favorite play tonight? Waylon, you first.
I like the Hornets -1.5 at Indiana. I know it's a back-to-back situation. I know that team has not played a ton of defense, but I really don't trust this Pacers team with all the injuries that they have. And I also like Miami -6 against the New York Knicks tonight. Miami 13-8 against the spread at home. Still no Kyle Lowry, but they have virtually everybody else back. I mean, this is a team that's been hit with injuries and COVID as bad as any. So as they get healthy, I think the best team in the East is in a pretty good spot tonight.
Other Nick, what do you think?
I like the Hornets Pacers going over tonight. Garen was talking a little bit about the lack of defense from the Hornets, of course, on the back-to-back makes it even more appealing. I know these are two teams that are right around 500 when it comes to the over-under, but when Charlotte is the favorite, I know they were small favorites tonight. Nick was talking about it, but 4 of those 5 times that's been the case when they're on the road, the over has hit. And then Indy tends to hit more often than not in home games on the over. And then without Sabonis in 2 of their recent 3 games without him, the over has hit. In both of those instances, they've gone to, I think it was 230. Either way, it was over the total for tonight. So the over on Hornets, Pacers, and Garyon's kind of talking me into thinking about Karis LeVert points prop tonight too.
Garyon, you're up.
Yeah, I'm just going to go with the Suns. They're slight road favorites on this slate. I just feel like the Jazz, they've been abysmal their last 10 games overall. They're 2-8. They actually have the 4th worst net rating in the Western Conference in that same span of time. They just have not been playing good basketball, and it's hard to expect them to play good basketball when they're missing their 2 best players. I mean, Mitchell gets all the headlines, obviously, but, we've got a 5-year sample now of what the Jazz are when Rudy Gobert is not on the court and just how important he is to that team. So Phoenix is also a little banged up. They're basically running like a 7.5-man rotation, which is why Bismack Biyombo is playing crazy amounts of minutes. But I just think this team that is actually 4-0 ATS their past 4 games as a road favorite. So they've got some experience covering in this spot. I think they make it 5-0 tonight.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. You are all done for the show, so enjoy the rest of your days. We will bring in 3 new smiling faces next. Little hockey talk. Stay with us. We are back on the sweat halfway home. I'm Adam Kaufman, and I guess I'm coaching a top line of talented forwards here. We got DraftKings contributor Jeff Ulrich, flanked by RotoWire's Paul Bruno and AJ Schulz. NHL opening faceoff, guys. Only 5 games tonight, and Jeff, we'll start with you. Favorite play at center?
I like going cheap here. Washington Capitals, I really like targeting their top line a lot. You've got Nick Backstrom back alongside Alex Ovechkin. That duo we know in the past has just been lights out. got a pretty good matchup here against the San Jose Sharks, 10 goals allowed in their last 2 games. Backstrom, he's just too cheap, realistically. Anyone playing alongside Alex Ovechkin is probably going to pick up an assist at some point, but Backstrom's got 2 goals in his last 2 games as well. I just like targeting this Washington Capitals team. They've got John Carlson back. Again, it's a good matchup, and Backstrom just way too cheap tonight.
What do you think, Paul?
He's right on the money. I'm in lockstep with Jeffrey. Today, he is talking about a guy who was moved back and forth on and off that line, but it's key to know when he's playing with Ovi, and that makes that a bargain. But there's another bargain on the board, a little bit more expensive. Dylan Larkin, a consistent scorer. He's priced at $6,600. I think this guy's one of the most underrated players in the NHL. 8 points in his last 10 games. He's a point-per-game player in last several years, and gets Chicago a poor road team tonight at home. And then I'm going to go up to one of the big boys, Austin Matthews, my favorite play tonight at the high end of the board, costing $8,800. I make his case because of the new line with Kasha and Bunting, a couple of guys who will grind and make plays to him, realizing their roles on the line. Then there's the fact that this guy's a point-per-game player and a power play focus as well. He's due for a big game tonight, and I say he gets it.
AJ, how did Paul not mention John Tavares? How did that not happen?
Because he's too in love with Matthews. If you listen to our podcast at all, it's just like an hour of just Paul talking about Austin Matthews. It seems like sometimes. But I'm with Jeff here tonight. I like targeting the Caps in that matchup, and I honestly, Paul's right too, taking the Leafs. But I'm going to go for the third favorite on the slate tonight at center. The Flames are going up against the Jackets. They're 185 favorites to win here. So I'm going to start building my lineup with Elias Lindholm at 6,000, which currently comes in well below Nathan McKinnon and Austin Matthews at the top of the board. He's on a 3-game point streak, so you're getting really good value here for a guy that's been putting up decent production all season long.
Let's go to the wing then, and Paul, we'll pivot right back to you. You going to the top? Are you going to start with Alex Ovechkin?
No, I'm going to go a little bit below. I'm going to go in the high end to Rantanen for $8,300. Look, the Avs are on a 7-game win streak, and they face the Bruins at home tonight. He's high among the points producers in the league as well on the season, averaging 3.5 shots on goal per game and 16 DraftKings points in his last 10 games. That's amazing, and quite a nice rate of return even on that high price tag. I also like Mitch Marner. People forget this guy's been a top 10 point getter in the last 2 years in the NHL. He's priced at only $5,800, and I think he's right on top of his game again with 11 points in his last 10 games, getting a lot of run on power play and shorthanded as well. He's one of the busiest guys in terms of ice time in the entire league. And finally, the guy I really like here is Matthew Tachook of Calgary for $6,000. 20 points in his last 10 games, facing a Columbus club that's lost 4 of the last 6. Give me some of that for sure.
Well, you want to talk streaking, AJ. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention David Pastrnak has like 73 goals this month.
Yeah, I mean, Boston is tempting, but I don't love the matchup, obviously, with Colorado. That's a better team there. Goaltending isn't great, admittedly, for the Avs, but instead, I'm going to stick with the Flames here and go with both Gaudreau and Tachook, who Paul mentioned. Johnny Gaudreau comes in at 62. Tachook at 6,000. Look, since the start of January, as Paul mentioned, Tachook is averaging 2 points per game. Gaudreau is right behind him at 1.875. Again, it's a really good matchup for the Flames. They're not going to break the bank for you in terms of being at the top of the lineup here. So I like just stacking that entire line against the Jackets tonight.
Where are you going to go, Moose?
I mean, we're not it's not rocket science here. Like, the Flames wingers are way underpriced, and everyone's going to know that. These guys are averaging almost 2 points per game over their last 10 games. And the Columbus Blue Jackets are a terrible defensive team. So really have to think, again, if you're approaching this in big fields, it might actually be a night to fade those Flames wingers and just hope you get like a slower game. I mean, I like going to the Chicago Blackhawks if you're going to do that. A guy like Dominik Kubalik, very cheap at $3,000. He's been productive. And the Blackhawks wingers have a very good matchup against the Detroit Red Wings as well. Kubalik, again, he gets the top 6 exposure. We're talking about a guy who obviously is only $3,000 and you're going to use more as a punt play. But you got to look for a little bit different ways, and maybe like paying down at wing and then paying up for like one expensive player like Rantanen or Ovechkin. It's going to let you get off those Flames wingers. So Again, I have nothing against the Flames wingers. It's a great spot, like I said. But if you're thinking strategy a little bit, Kubalik is a guy you could certainly throw in there.
Doesn't seem like there's necessarily a standout defenseman tonight, AJ. I mean, someone like John Carlson's obviously in a really good spot, but who do you like here?
Well, I'm definitely very similar to being, kind of off Boston and Pasternak. I'm leery on Colorado a little bit in terms of paying up for Cale Makar. Look, I think he'll produce, but at 7,200, it's a little too high for me. So I want to get a share of the Avs, but cheaper on the lineup here. And Devin Taves comes in at 5,200, so a huge discount. Look, he's 6th-a-month defenseman for shots in the month of January with 33. He's picking up 12 points over that stretch as well. If you really want to get cheap on this slate, Rasmus Sandin for the Leafs is getting some looks with the number 2 power play unit there, and he comes in at just 2,600. So there are some cheaper options you can still get with power play opportunities as well.
What do you think here, Paul?
Well, I think I like the price tag on Makar. It's lower than it's been in the last several weeks, but there's another guy on the Avalanche blue line that I like even more, and that's Devin Taves. He continues to enjoy a career-best season, Adam, and he's got 32 points in 29 games. Nobody's talking about him. He's costing only $5,200 on that same game and averaging 13 DraftKings points per game in his last 10 outings. Even cheaper than that, I like Oliver Shillington, been a favorite low-end play of mine all season, costing only $3,600, but logs almost 20 minutes per game. He's on a season-high pace with 30 shots on goal in his last 10 starts, too.
Jeff, what do you think? Who jumps out at you?
Yeah, certainly a night where you could double up in the 5K range. I mean, you mentioned Carlson off the top. He's just too cheap. I mean, we don't see John Carlson at 5,600 most nights, but he's coming off an injury and like one slow game back. I mean, this is a player who averages nearly a point per game. Pretty good matchup as well. You can certainly easily pair him with Ovechkin and Backstrom and just start your lineups that way. I mean, I actually really like that tonight. But you can double up in that range. You can go McAvoy, you can go Taves. The guys already threw out some good value options. I'll throw out one more. Philip Ronak of the Detroit Red Wings. Again, we've got a great matchup against Chicago. They have a bottom 10 penalty kill as well. Ronak gets you some power play exposure. He's averaging over 0.5 points per game. So there's lots of good value options. Definitely a night on defense where I think cheaper the better. You pay up at other spots and save your money at the D.
Well, let's talk value. Keep going with that. Jeff, we'll stay with you. And I'm being serious when I ask this question. Is there a better option out there than Ondrej Kase?
Sure. I mean, he's fine, but I mean, like there's other players you can play on this slate. I mean, you don't have to go to the Boston Bruins just because Adam Kaufman is
He's on Toronto.
Today, so.
Don't tell me I'm going to the Boston Bruins. He's a Maple Leaf.
Oh, sorry, the Toronto. The dude moves teams like every year, so I mean, it's an easy mix. But
look,
anyway,
he's a first liner. He's on the power play unit as well. He's a good play.
I'll do the analysis. You just sit there and host, please, and
okay.
Stop throwing out players who change teams. Look, there's lots of value on this slate. We've already gone over guys. I think Connor Sheary is a guy. Again, I mean, to go back to the Capitals. This is a player who obviously playing on the top line now. He's been a part of the top 6 for the Capitals for a while. But Sheary is just a player who averages not quite a point per game, but he's been up there as well. Look, again, I think this is a slate where you need to get and think a little bit outside the box because everyone's going to be on the same kind of plays. Looking at the Columbus Blue Jackets here is another good spot. You got Rosalik, Gustav Nyquist as well, Alex Teixeira. You could roster a couple of these guys, maybe leave some salary on the slate. So for big fields, there's a lot of different ways you can go. Columbus Blue Jackets definitely a contrarian option.
Paul, I guess I should have saved my Kasha question for you. What do you think? Who are you going with tonight?
I love it. You took the words right out of my mouth. I don't want to sound like a homer, so I'll go on to other players because you made the case already. Andre Burakovsky is a left winger on the second line alongside Kadri for Colorado. He has 32 points in 38 games, 8 in his last 10, averaging 16 DraftKings points per game in his last 10, costing only $4,000, facing a Bruins team that some may shy away from, but they're not looking good defensively over the last few games that I've seen. And then lower than him, I like Alexander Barabanov. I've talked about him a couple of times because he's still got the plum assignment alongside Meyer and Hurdle, the top line in San Jose. He costs $3,100. I know he's only got 6 points in his last 10 games, but this is still a great opportunity.
AJ, what do you think?
Look, Adam, you came in with a great take with Kasha. I'm with you there as well. As an alternative option, I actually really do like getting a share of the Caps like Jeff recommended, but I'm actually going to look at Tom Wilson. which, again, Paul's going to be shocked that I said this because normally I have no good things to say about Tom Wilson. But in terms of tonight's matchup, first line is where he's expected to be, back with Ovechkin, 3,900. He's on the number one power play unit. So, look, as long as he doesn't take, a 10-minute major or 5-minute major and a misconduct, which is always an option with Tom Wilson, he should be on the ice in some good spots and add some good value and give you a share of the cap.
In all seriousness, has Kasha been confirmed to play tonight? I think he's in, but we've talked about him like 10 times on this.
And he's only $3,400, Jeff.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. The Roto. That's the one to confirm. Give some good info here.
Goes full circle. Calling me a homer. He's not even a Bruin anymore. Guys, you're free to go. Other than you, Jeff, we're gonna keep talking about Kasha for the next 10 minutes, or we'll do football. That's next. All right, here we go. One more round of football talk before we call it a show. Jeff Ulrich is back. He is joined by fellow DK contributors Reed T. Fowler and Julian Edlow, who is he's giving away tickets to sporting events all the time on Twitter now. You should really give him a follow. And we also know, obviously, whose bets are doing best among the three of you. So congrats to you, all these free tickets. Jules, NFL Championship Sunday is coming. We talked earlier on the show about the DraftKings Sportsbook specials. Now we just want to know who's going to stand out. Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, they're plus 175, both of them, to have the most passing yards on Sunday. Then you have Matt Stafford at plus 250, Jimmy Garoppolo, who seems nobody is taking seriously, at plus 550. Where would you put your money?
I think the Rams secondary does have some issues, so there might be something to the Jimmy G passing prop in general. But no, I'm not going to back him to, outpass these three studs in the championship round. I mean, after what we saw in Bengals versus Chiefs in Week 17 and what we saw in Bills versus Chiefs last weekend, I don't know how you can't look to that game. And honestly, I like the Chiefs in the game, so Mahomes should have a good game. But if you're going to say Burrow's playing from behind, that entices me on him. Honestly, if you go to one of the other tabs, you can get Mahomes and Burrow combined to throw for 600-plus yards at plus 150. So if you're picking between plus 175 on who's going to throw for more, why not just take these guys to go over 600 combined at plus 150? That's my favorite quarterback prop in the specials to back this weekend because it's hard to imagine both of these guys don't put on a show.
Yeah, and of course we were talking about that one earlier in the show. It's a strong
bet
team. And no, I'm praising you for bringing it back because clearly it's a good bet available, good special in the DraftKings Sportsbook. Moose, it is tough to know. It feels like you need a crystal ball to know which of those aforementioned three are really going to jump out. Who's in that noggin there? Who stands out?
Well, sure. I mean, we need a crystal ball to predict any of this stuff. It's the NFL. I mean, They scored. The Green Bay Packers scored like 7 points in the last game.
The weather was terrible.
Yeah. Look, so for the passing thing, I mean, if Jimmy G was bigger, I'd actually really like him in the spot. But realistically, what we need to do is just look at the odds. I mean, I just don't think Jimmy Garoppolo at plus 550 is big enough. He's going to be in that nice, LA weather or Western side of the U.S. weather or whatever, so that's good. But
good old Western side.
Yeah, I love that Western side of the U.S.
Trust me. Anyways, the weather in KC is going to be fine. So I don't see Patrick Mahomes not having a good day. I mean, I just don't think that there's going to be enough here against the Cincinnati Bengals to hold him back. I think the fact you're getting plus 175. I mean, even at plus 100 in Mahomes, you might be a little bit interested, but I think the fact you're getting Patrick Mahomes, again, completed 75% of his passes against the Buffalo Bills last week. Like, what is he going to do against Cincinnati, who's pretty much like worse at everything than the Bills? And I'm not saying they're terrible. They're just worse than the Bills. I think Patrick Mahomes is actually the value here, and that's probably where I'd go in this prop.
Reed, we haven't heard a word from you yet. I've missed you. What do you got?
No, I appreciate it. These guys are right. I think you got to lean into the AFC game. Jimmy G is someone that scares you quite a bit, but the Rams, yards after catch, they're third in the NFL in getting up yards after catch, right? So you have to kind of play it that way if you're going to the NFC game. But I'm just not confident in Cincinnati's offensive line to help Burrow in this one out. I know that you can give up a ton of after the yards or after the catch yards if you're Kansas City's defense, but I'll just lean with Mahomes here. He's just so good. And the Chiefs blitz at like top 8, top 10 in the NFL right now. It's going to give a guy like Burrow some issues. So give me Patrick Mahomes.
Jeff, Elijah Mitchell is the favorite to rush for the most yards. We've got him at plus 200. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think running back is a far more volatile thing here than the passing yards. Obviously, we could even like throw in injury concerns, but usage, Mitchell's gotten there from the usage perspective, but he's got the worst matchup. I mean, the Rams, top 5 rush defense all season long. He had trouble against producing big chunks against him in the last time these two teams met. He did go over 90 yards, but he needed like 27 carries to get there. I think you go bigger here. I think this is a spot where you go to the KC backfield. I think you probably look at Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who was really running the ball better than Jerick McKinnon. Jerick McKinnon was running a ton of routes, but Edwards-Helaire, I figure, is in a spot here. He's got the way better matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals rush defense, who is bad down the stretch. If they get ahead in this game, I think you'll see a bigger workload. So plus 700. CEH is the guy I'd look to in this one.
Reed, I sort of feel like we're not giving Joe Mixon his due here. Who's your favorite among this group?
Yeah, no, good on you for mentioning him, Kauf. When he kind of is that one player that could easily do this. And Zach Taylor likes to run the ball and establish the run. But in that game, I think they're going to be playing from behind. I think you have to take a look at Cam Akers. He's the freshest out of the bunch of these guys. He's seeing 81% of the snaps, 80% of the rushing attempts in that game. And I'm bearish on this passing game for both the Rams and the 49ers. So I like that. The other thing I wanted to mention, too, is if you want to take a rushing prop of anyone, go to Patrick Mahomes and his rushing yards, go over 29.5. This guy, all he does in the playoffs is ramp up his rushing yards, and he's hit this over in 4 of his last 6, and he's averaged, I think, around 35, 37 rushing yards in his 8 playoff games. So if you want to take a rushing prop, go to Mahomes.
I'm a lot more comfortable with the old Tom Brady 1.5, Reed. What do you think, Jules?
First of all, I'm in total agreement with the Mahomes rushing yards in the postseason. He always just there's more on the line, so he puts his body on the line more. Pretty simple, especially if it's a closer game. And we all know the Super Bowl against the 49ers, terrible beat when Mahomes was running backwards and went under, but he's generally gone over in these playoff games. Did you know Patrick Mahomes, 69 rushing yards, led last weekend all 4 games? He was the leading rusher in the divisional round. Josh Allen won behind him at 68. I think Mahomes was 80-1 to be the leading rusher of divisional weekend and cashed that ticket. So while I want to go Eli Mitchell here, I think it's like this is one passing. I think you can get square and be like, oh, go Mahomes. Rushing is a little harder to predict. These teams don't run as much. I think I kind of lean to the 49ers. So I think that means Eli Mitchell has to have a good game, but maybe it's Deebo Samuel that busts out. The thing is, Jeff's talking about the odds, 550 on Garoppolo, plus 550 on a receiver to lead in rushing. That's just not enough for me. So this has to be a dart for me where we go to something like a Jerick McKinnon at plus 1,000. Maybe the Chiefs build up that lead and keep going to him. Or a Sony Michel at 1,600. Remember, Cam Akers has been dinged up. He looked fantastic last week, but heavy workload. You're betting on something like, you don't want to wish it, but like an early tweak to Akers and it goes to Michel. I think you got to go something long odds, a weird game script here.
Last one, guys. We got to be relatively fast with this one. For receivers, obviously Cooper Kupp's Cooper Kupp. He's the favorite to have the most yards, plus 225. But Jamar Chase, he's plus 450. Are these guys the front runners to lead the league in receiving this weekend, Reed, or somebody else going to steal the show?
Yeah, I'm taking an outside shot. I don't like Jimmy Garoppolo to go over his passing, but Deebo Samuel at plus 1,000. If you take a look at yards after the catch, he was second to Kupp, and the Kansas City Chiefs have given up the most yards after catch this season. So give me him as an outside.
Julian?
Last week, my Make It Rain pick on the sweat was Tyreek Hill at 6,600. I don't know why he was so cheap and he went off. Now you're going to give me plus 600 on Tyreek Hill to lead 2 games as the leading receiver. Give me Tyreek Hill plus 600.
Jeff, you get the last word.
I'll go T. Higgins at plus 8,500. We saw what the Chiefs secondary obviously gave up to Gabriel Davis, secondary receiver there. Higgins has gone for 90-plus yards 3 of his last 7 games. I'll also throw Joe Mixon at plus 4,000 here. Ooh. Game script's going to be perfect for a big receiving game from Joe Mixon.
All right, guys, you're wonderful. Thank you very much. We'll see who among you joins us for the slate tomorrow, or the sweat tomorrow, rather. Of course, this show comes your way Monday through Friday, plus Sundays during the NFL season. And the slate, that does come your way 5 o'clock Eastern time after the 4 o'clock Madden Sim. And speaking of Madden Sims, Broncos-Bills coming your way noon Eastern a few minutes from now. The slate reads on with Jeff and Emerson Lotzi at PGA Talk later on. See ya.